Hi, good morning.
Hello, good morning. So we are in really good hands today. Maria has a really interesting background. She worked for the European Parliament. She also was working for the Human Rights Watch organization, and she helped over 1,000 social entrepreneurs with their struggles as a business. And she has a lot of experience in these big events.
Thank you, Jay. And for those who don't know Jay, because they may be joining from our side, from Unleash, he's been so helpful with Miro, and we've been working together a lot lately to do our programs online and in Miro particularly. So, yeah. All right. Wait. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah, so a short introduction to Unleash for those of you that may not know it yet. We are a global initiative that we bring together youth. This can be young leaders, experts, entrepreneurs, to collaboratively develop solutions to the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. If you don't know what the Sustainable Development Goals are, I strongly suggest you to Google this after the workshop. But basically, these are 17 goals that were set up by the United Nations in 2015, and that the world should reach by 2030. And so they cover the 3 dimensions of sustainable development. That's social, economic, and environmental aspects. And yeah, and so Unleash always works with the framework of the SDGs. So as you may have seen, our board today is a giant SDG icon. And I will probably keep referring to the SDGs, which is short for Sustainable Development Goals, throughout the session. But back to Unleash. What we want to do is to be the world's leading platform for innovative, scalable solutions for social and environmental impact, so for the SDGs, by engaging youth around the world to problem solve, and by supporting those solutions to grow, and so they can create real impact in the world. So we do this through a number of programs. The first one, represented here by our main icon, Unleash. It's our biggest event. It's a global innovation lab where we bring 1,000 people from around the world to develop solutions together. This usually happens once a year, although because of obvious reasons it's been postponed now. And we go to different countries every time. So if you want to know more about that, you can follow our social media and find out. Our second program that we launched last year is Unleash Hacks. These are sprint-like event, so-called hackathons, which you may know, where people from the same region or country, so they have a local focus, come together to solve a problem that their community faces. So it's much more local than the first program that we have. And then we have Unleash Storytellers, and here we invite youth with a comms and media background to create advocacy products or campaigns or media campaigns that can advance solutions for the Sustainable Development Goals. And lastly, we have Unleash Plus, which is our pre-acceleration program that runs for 6 months. And there we support early stage solutions to grow and create impact. Yeah, and all of our programs are free of charge. We want to be as inclusive as possible, so we cover costs for everyone that joined us. So what is the methodology that we base our programs on? So Unleash has a methodology that leverages existing and best practices from innovation, design thinking, and human-centered design. And we've designed it always thinking of diversity of talents, which are the participants that take part in our programs, of insights and of ideas. This is key in all of our programs, and especially important in our Global Innovation Lab, because we believe that it's this diversity and this friction which then gives results into innovative solutions with potential for impact. And so our innovation process consists of 5 phases that the participants navigate with the help of facilitators. And these are problem framing, so framing a problem based on actionable insights, conceptualizing solutions, that's ideation, prototyping, which we will focus on today, That's creating a quick physical representation of your idea, testing, having real users and stakeholders experience the solution and iterating it, so going back and refining it, and finally implementing, getting ready to go to market to launch the solution. I also, before we start, I also wanted to mention that the Unleash hackathons that I mentioned earlier, we launched last year, were launched fully online because of COVID-19, although they were planned to be physical. And so we had this program fully in Miro last year, and we're doing it again. And so today you will get a taste of what Unleash is and what Unleash has. But if you're interested in learning more and taking part in this, you can apply. We'll probably have applications opening in March or April. And this is just a picture of how those boards looked like, or a portion of them. But let's get started to what brings us here today, which is prototyping. And so why are we prototyping? Well, this is a key phase in the process, but also something you learn. It's about learning by doing, and something you have to keep in mind throughout the process. So it should be a prototype-driven design process where you think through your hands, sort of, and especially with platforms like Miro that really encourage you to be creative. I think this is the best way to create innovative solutions. But so rapid prototyping is a demonstration of specific parts of the solution concept that are concrete enough for people to react to. So you basically take the idea that you have in your mind and you create something tangible that then you can show to the real user or to stakeholders. There are different misconceptions out there about prototyping. The first one being that prototypes are expensive and they're time consuming. The truth is that they will actually reduce the risk of losing money, and it will save you time in the long term. Also, there's a lot about prototypes must be lifelike. I need to create something that looks exactly like what I want to ultimately do, what I have in my mind. Again, not true. Prototypes are a work in progress, and they're just a basic representation of your solution or of an element of your solution. So it doesn't have to be the entire thing yet. Prototypes need to work well. Ideally, that's the aim. But actually, failure is key, is part of the process, and it's all about enlightened trial and error. So it's okay to fail. This is how it should go. Then you go back and refine it. And lastly, prototyping requires technical skills. Really great tools out there that you can use. So it's not necessarily that you need to know how to code or be an expert in the matter. Yeah. As I was saying, prototyping is all about learning by doing. And so what you shouldn't do, it's PowerPoint the idea to death before you start building something. What you should do, it's as in the second picture, prototype, try it out. The faster you find weaknesses, the faster you can improve what needs fixing. So before we start, and I promise it's going to get more fun and engaging soon, it's important to keep this in mind. So why are we building? We're building because we have a framed, clear problem that affects a clear user. What are we building? We're building a simplified version of our solution or an element of this solution to validate our assumptions, which are things we think are true about our problem, its users, the solution itself, and our capacity to build it. And how will we define what to build with few resources? Well, by defining key questions to be answered, by putting our prototypes in the hands of the real users, and by making their feedback actionable, which is essential step after prototyping. So we're going to get started now. Today we're following 5 key steps. These are problem and solution, clarifying our assumption, mapping our assumptions, turning them into design specifications, and finally prototyping. This is key. In order to build a good prototype, you need to know how to approach this stage. So the way we're going to do it is you all going to go to, if you want to, you can also just stay here and ask questions. But if you feel like prototyping, which is the point of this workshop, you should jump to the board that Jerry has shared a number of times in the chat. And then you can find your sustainable development goal of your liking and find an empty workstation in it. Then you can write your name and LinkedIn if you want others to find you to network. And then I will present each step. I will show you an example of how it's done, and then I'll give you guys time so you can work on the step yourself. All right. So the first step is to state the problem you're solving and state the solution. You can't prototype anything without an idea first, the actual solution, and you can't have a solution without a problem that it's addressing. You should definitely not have a solution if there's no real problem behind it. So first, what is the problem that you want to solve? And it's important that you include the affected people and organization and their needs. And secondly, how are you solving this problem? So if you have a startup, if you have a solution in mind, please use that as a case throughout the workshop. If you don't and you can't think of one right now, you can use this one here that you can see in the screen. This is a smart automated irrigation system and mobile application for rural farmers gathering humidity, moisture, and climate data. So this is the solution. The problem is that it is addressing is that farmers in rural areas are really struggling to adapt their irrigation system with all the changes that climate change is causing, and it's very time consuming and it's very challenging for them to do. So if they only had a smart system that would take all the necessary data and do it for them, it would be much better for their farming. So you can take that example if you need to, but if you have one, please stick to that. And here's the example that I'm choosing and that I will use throughout the workshop. So the problem I'm working to solve is that elderly people struggle with adherence to medication, and this costs 125,000 lives every year in the US alone. So people forget the quantities to take, when to take them, and when to stop. In addition, they also just forget to buy more. So my solution for the problem above is an automated pill dispenser for elderly people that provides data to the doctors through an app. So I'm building a pill dispenser that will give everyone the pills they need to take, how much they need to take, when they need to take them. So this is my problem and my solution. I will now give you 3 minutes approximately, so you can go to your workstation in the Miro board, and you can write your own problem and your solution. You can do this using post-its, is the easiest way, or stickies. You can click, as you can see here, you can click N in your keyboard. You can copy paste them, and you can change the size of them by dragging the corners. I'm gonna set the timer now and give you 3 minutes. I can show you. So you basically, if you're in the board, you would basically zoom out if you were following me. And then you will find this giant SDG icon. And then say, oh, I really want to work on climate action, like Elena is doing. So you go to the SDG of climate action, zoom in, find a workstation that's empty, like number 9. Write your name, and then jump to step 1 and write your problem and your solution.
Yeah, so I guess it's good to zoom out a bit on the board, try to find an empty workspace, put your name on it, and you claim it and it's yours, and then you can always get back to it later. Maybe we do the timer a little bit longer, Maria.
Yes, please. I'm still trying to find my SDG.
Sorry, guys. I think I'm using my iPad. I'm so confused. It's so many things here. It's a mobile Miro. It's easy to use.
I think it's recommended to be in a laptop if you can. My guess is that an iPad would work okay, but Jerry, if you have any
Number 8. Okay.
So the board will take some time to load because it's a bit heavy. You should just be patient and wait. Do not try to refresh it. Once it's loaded, it will work well. So it just takes a bit of time.
Maria, I just sent you a private message.
Maybe it's good for everybody to know that if you press N on the keyboard, you will get a new sticky, and then you can just type on your sticky, and then the sticky note you can then place in the field that you want to type. It's easier than making text boxes.
All right. We're going to move to the next step slowly. I could bring everyone to me on the board, but I'm guessing that some of you are still finishing, so I won't do that. You can just follow by looking at Zoom again, since I'm sharing my screen. Maybe that's the easiest. Okay. So the second step, it's about assumptions. So assumptions is everything you think it's true about your solution, about your user, and about their needs. So there are 3 categories that you can think of, or you should be thinking of. The first one is desirability. So why would the user want your solution? Then it's feasibility. What do we technically work to make this solution work? So what do we technically need to make it work? And the last one, viability. Who will pay for this? How is your solution sustainable, financially sustainable? How much do we need to cover our costs? A pro tip on how to find your assumptions is to ask the same questions but negatively. That way you can find your deepest assumptions. So it may be really obvious for you why your user wants your solution, because this is clearly the thing they need to make their life better. But if you ask yourself, why would the user not want my solution? You might find out assumptions that will be key for your prototype. So in our example, which was this pill dispenser for elderly people that forget to take their medication and when to take them and how much to take them, we came up with these assumptions. So why would someone want to use my pill dispenser? Well, they want a simple way to manage their medication intake. They want their prescribed medication to be automatically reordered. They want something that reminds them when to take them and what to take. This yellow post-it, it's yellow because this is something that we thought of when we reversed the question. So why would someone not want my amazing automated pill dispenser? Well, maybe, elderly people won't trust this type of machine as something so technological. That means that we're assuming that elderly people will trust my program. So that would be your assumption. Maybe people don't have time to read the medication information and they just want something to do it for them. What do I technically need for this pill dispenser to work well? Well, a mechanical release that will release the pills, a way for pills to be added and sorted accurately in the box, a process that knows what pills the person needs and how much and when, a way to ensure, and this is really important, that the doses are always accurate. So because I'm working with medication, in my case, it's very important that the machine functions well and it doesn't give the wrong medication or too much or too little of something. And then when I ask myself, so who will pay for this? How will I sustain my product? Well, perhaps the family will pay for this. Maybe health insurances would. Maybe the user himself or herself. And lastly, we thought maybe government programs. So this is how I found out the assumptions about my solution. So now I'm going to ask you to take 10 minutes. Do the same for yours. So just like you did now, you will go back to your workstation where you wrote your problem and solution. And as Jared was saying, you can click in your keyboard and get a sticky. And then copy paste the stickies or get many different colors you want and write the assumptions for these categories. Okay, I'm going to set the timer. If you have any questions, please write them in the chat. Again, the way you do this is by zooming out, if you were following me, and finding your workstation, wherever you are, zooming back in your workstation, and then going to activity 2 or step 2.
So the board will stay open after the workshop, so you guys don't have to worry that you will lose your content. So you can always collaborate and go back to what you wrote. And all the information will be available. We got a question here, Maria. Maybe you can answer that. And meanwhile, how do we know how much people are willing to pay for it?
Yeah, I was just typing that. So you don't know that yet. You're making an assumption of how much people would want to pay for your solution. And then you're testing this assumption with real users through your prototype.
Maybe just to add to that, because I just got back. Hello, everyone. Yeah, Romana, just to your question, there's actually two ways that you could do that. One is just looking at the prices of competitors in the market. So often you would get a good idea of how much people are pricing, or at least how much people are willing to pay based on how people in the same market as you are selling. And you can benchmark against that. As Maria said, you can also come up with a given price, knowing what it will cost you to make it, and discuss it with your potential customers and understand if this is something they would be willing to pay. You can also just do it based on the cost that you have, but what you might end up having is that even if you do price something based on the cost that it takes you to make your product, it might be too high compared to what people actually want to pay. And then you're in a situation where you actually cannot fulfill a market. Hope that helps.
So Greg is program lead at Unleashed. As Jerry said at the beginning, he had an emergency and couldn't join at the start, but he's here now, just for context.
We also got a question a little bit earlier. If my product is a physical product and I have several variations in mind, is it better to prototype one type and test it, or all variations and test it all? So do you start with one ID, or do you test it at the same time is the question.
Maria, should I take that? Cool. So I tried to answer the question in the chat, actually. So the next step that we'll be doing as part of this activity, or as part of the session, is actually mapping our assumptions and understanding which of them we really need to be testing as soon as possible. And by doing that, you'll be prioritizing which parts of your solution you should be testing. So most likely you will have parts of your product that you would need to start testing sooner than other parts, because those are the critical ones. And if you keep going in the development of your product without having tested them, you're increasing your risk, and you might get to a point where you simply are not matching the need of a user, or you simply cannot technically execute what you're trying to do. But we'll get to that in the next activity.
And there's one more question that I don't completely understand by Caro. If by doing this, I find a possible conflict, where should I write it? Could you maybe elaborate, or in the chat or live, Caro? Is it about Miro board, or is it about the workshop?
So Caro, are you looking at the... Aha, well, that's exactly why we're doing this. So if you're finding a conflict, then that's exactly why we're actually doing this activity, because you might realize that your initial idea didn't actually have someone or an organization that could pay for it. And so you have to think through how you will finance this. Regardless of if you're a non-profit or you're a for-profit, you will need to have some kind of funding to be able to develop what you're building. So you need to find who will actually be able to pay for that.
So jumping on this, I have a question then. I wonder whether I should switch maybe from the person who pays for it that becomes my user and the other would just be the beneficiary.
So that's a very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a super. I'll take it quickly. It's very important that you distinguish your customer, the person who pays, and the user, the person who uses, and actually a beneficiary. So you can have even those three categories. And a typical example is in education. So a child might be benefiting from a solution that the teacher is using, but the parents are paying for it. So it might be, or it could be the government paying for it. And so you do just need to make sure that someone can pay for it, definitely. And that might not be the same person who's using it.
Yeah.
Maria, would you like to?
Because in my case, for example, if it's a solution for farmers, and maybe farmers would benefit from this solution if I would rather work with service providers, for example. And therefore, I should really prototype something for service providers that wouldn't really, yeah, in this case, would actually benefit farmers, that's for sure. But it would benefit probably service providers more and consequently also farmers. So yeah, it's a little bit of a conflict here as well.
Well, what you would probably do is that you would, and so let's see what Maria does now. It'll give you clarity on how to actually prioritize, and then you'll see. Yeah.
Okay. So if you slowly come back to Zoom, I think that's the easiest, where I'm sharing my screen, or otherwise follow me in the Miro board. We're going to continue to step 3. Yeah. So the next step is about taking all of your assumptions, every post-it or sticky that you just wrote, and throwing it in this graph so you can see which ones you should prioritize. So with each sticky, with each of your assumptions, you should think, how impactful is this assumption in my solution? How important is it for my solution to work well, for instance? And how confident I am in this assumption, how much I believe in it and I am sure it's true. So, for example, in our case, these were all the assumptions that we wrote for my pill dispenser that will give pills to elderly people when they need them and what they need, etc. So this is the assumptions we wrote. We threw them in here. And as an example, on the top left of the graph, you can see that it says a way to ensure that the doses are always accurate. So this, for my solution, is very impactful because if the doses are not always accurate, then it could be fatal for my solution. It could have drastic consequences. How confident I am that my solution can always be accurate. Not so confident. I actually don't know if a pill dispenser can be 100% accurate all the time or whether there is human error in it. That's why I put my sticky here. Another example, I thought the user himself or herself can pay for this pill dispenser. What is the impact of this in my solution? Not so much, not so high, because if the user doesn't pay himself, maybe the government pays, maybe health insurances pay. So we can find an alternative way of doing this. How confident I am on it? Not so confident, actually. I think elderly people may not be the most wealthy and may not be willing to spend money on this themselves. So I'm not so confident on it, but it's also not so important. It doesn't have a high impact on my solution. So you basically do this with all of your assumptions. You can copy paste them from step 2. You can, to do that, you select your sticky and in your keyboard, you can press Ctrl+Z. Go back to step 3, press Ctrl+V to paste them and move them around by clicking on them and not letting them go. And then you just locate it in the graph, depending on how you feel about them. So for this, we'll have 5 minutes. I'll set the timer now. And again, you zoom out of here, find your workstation, and complete step 3. If you have any questions, again, you can write them in the chat.
And while you're doing your exercise, step 3, just give me 10 seconds to introduce also Gregory to you guys. I'm really happy that he made it at the end because he had to go to the hospital this morning. So thanks, Greg, for coming. Gregory has an impressive background as a serial entrepreneur. He has founded a lot of businesses himself, and he was also managing director of Seed Stars. And now he's one of the program managers at Unleash, and he has a lot of experience with helping prototyping and a lot of other use cases for businesses. So thanks, Greg, that you could make it. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And I think Maria mentioned, I was listening in from the hospital. But as Maria mentioned, I think Miro has also been a big part of what we've been doing over the last year and a half. So happy to contribute to the community as well.
Šajā gadījumā nav nekāda iepirkuma, tāpēc, ka 660 no 680 aiziet barterī. Tāpēc pārdošana ir 20K, 20K un 20K. Šitas ir naudas plūsmā. Jā, šeit kopsumā plusā ir 20K, 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 bet šeit atkal tas pats, tie visi tā kā PZA, visi tie un te rezultāts ir 60K, plus mīnus atkal tie šitie te, paliek rezultāts 50K. Pareizi? Šis rezultāts ir ok, bet jautājums ir...
Arī šis rezultāts ir nemainīgs.
Visi rezultāti ir nemainīgi, bet mēs jau runājam par procesu. Šeit uzņēmums strādā 20,000 apgrozījumu un nopelna 50,000. Šeit viņš strādā 683 miljonu, nu tur 2 miljonu apgrozījumu. Ja? Jautājums jau tieši par to, ka parādīt, kā ir korekti, jo uz 2 miljonu apgrozījumu.
How's everyone doing? Do you guys need more time? Was this enough? It's slowly coming back to the presentation.
Probably a couple of more minutes or a minute. That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, we're going to move to step 4. So again, you can go back to Zoom if that's easier for you because I'm sharing my screen, or you can follow me in the Miro board. Greg, should I go ahead and present the step, or do you want to?
Yeah, go ahead, sure.
Okay. So the next step in the process is to take the, so what we've done is mapped all of our assumptions in this graph to understand which ones we should prioritize. So basically, it's most important that you start testing the assumptions that you can find in the top left corner of the graph. And this is because those assumptions have a lot of impact in your solution. And those assumptions you don't have so much confidence on. So you're not so sure about them, and they really impact your solution. So what you want to do now is take all the posits or stickies that you found that you pasted in this side of the graph, and basically you take that assumption. So we're assuming that X, that would be your sticky, and ask yourself, how might I be sure that X, that will be your sticky, your assumption, and then you need to prototype something to answer that question. So in my example, my assumption was that we need a way to ensure that the doses of my pill dispenser are always accurate, that they never fail. So for that, I will prototype a model of self-verifying system. Another assumption was in that top left side of my graph is elderly people would trust it. So I assume that people trust my automated pill dispenser. In order to be sure that this is the case, I will prototype a fake automated box with voice sounds that looks very tech-like, so I can put it in front of elderly people and really test if that's true. Another one that I had is they want something to remind them when and what to take. So for my pill dispenser, I really trust that people want something to remind them of their pills. To be sure that this is the case, I can build a simple reminder system and test it out, whether they need or they want to be reminded, or this is not actually something they need. Step 4 basically is to take all your post-its in the top left side of your graph, and you can copy paste them. So go back to step 3, select the sticky, Control-C in your keyboard, Control-V to paste it back in step 4. And then you need to create new sticky. So transform that assumption into a design specification. So something you will actually prototype to test the initial assumption. So you can paste them here from step 3 and create your prototype on the other side. So for this, I will give you 10 minutes. And again, you can zoom out in the board, find your workstation and do step 4. And if you have any questions, please write them in the chat.
In the meantime, I think I'll just a quick comment. I'm just seeing a few people are doing some really good work on transferring these mapped assumptions now into design specifications. I'm looking at Elena Salamandic, and I saw she was doing great work there. Happy to also discuss it later a bit more. Was also looking at Carlos before. So if you have any questions along the way, just do feel free to let us know. It's great to see you all getting along. I also see that our good friend Killian is here. Killian, who's been part of Unleash in multiple ways. Great to have you back.
Sorry, actually, I have a question. I'm a bit struggling because I have some assumptions, and I think from a feasibility point of view, it's easier just to research on them, to just read a few studies. And maybe there's kind of missing a 4.1 step where to really, because of we always have limited resources, what assumptions do actually deserve my attention for actually creating a prototype? Maybe do you have there like a framework on how to not waste too much time on like something that can be easily tested by like doing like desk research?
Well, I think it's a very, very good point, but I also feel like you almost answered the question yourself there, because if you're realizing that it's not worth doing a prototype for it because you can first do desk research, then you should definitely do that. And then once you've done that, then you'll have clarity on what you should next actually build, or if you're going in the right direction. So it's true, maybe for you in this case, you even just representing your current thinking might be the best approach. So when you do your research, you can really say, well, is what I was thinking correct, or is the research actually showing me that what I thought was not really the right approach? So I think that's also a good, it's a good result. It means you're understanding better what is known and not. I'm just looking at your board now. Can you explain a little bit more what you're actually looking into here?
It's basically a very broad problem, like that quality education is very expensive nowadays. There's this huge cost of tuition, but on the other hand, the cost of information and the accessibility, because everything is on the internet, is like very low. So there's this huge gap. And yeah, what I'm trying to figure out, of course, there are already big solutions out there like Udemy, Coursera, but yeah, how do you make sure that there's not so many students that have these large portions of debt and can start working, yeah, having not these burdens. So I'm taking a very top-down, holistic view, and also my assumptions are not so detailed, I have to say, but yeah.
And so in this case, you're thinking that the lack of real human contact might be a problem, and so you would like to research and understand preferences about current online courses and how people are responding to that.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, I think maybe just a recommendation here. I don't know the numbers. I don't know the numbers of Coursera, Udemy, Khan Academy, Linda. I mean, there's quite a few out there. I don't know the numbers, but I think it's in the millions of users. So it does seem like something is working. What could be interesting is to think about, those who do struggle with the online format, and maybe break it down. Well, is it the video part of it? Is it the reading part of it? Is it the lack of learning by doing part of it? And I think that's also, very much what we're doing today is learning by doing. And so maybe it's also, going a step down into that problem that you're looking into and saying, well, it is a broad problem, but what actually in the ways of learning online is not working for some people, and how can you maybe cater for that, where some of the competitors are already catering in some ways.
Yeah, I agree. I think the 5 why framework would really help her in framing this problem, what was taught by Unleash. So yeah, but this is yeah more about prototyping. I agree.
Great. So Maurice is referring to asking yourself the question why 5 times when you're confronted by something, and sometimes you end up going deeper into the assumption that you're making or the problem that you're facing. I saw the time is up. Maria, did you want to carry on?
Yes, I think there are more questions in the chat, but maybe we can take them in the end in the Q&A. I think it's more interesting to take them live. Okay, let's just move on to the last step for the sake of time. You can go back to Zoom if that's easier for you to follow my presentation, or you can follow me in the Miro board. So step 5 is prototyping. So the goal is to create a simplified version of the solution or an element of the solution that users can experience and react to. So there are 3 different types of prototyping, and you can pick one that is more appropriate to the assumption you're trying to test. So works like it's a prototype that works like you want them to function. Looks like it's a prototype that looks like you want them to look. And Maid-Like, it's a prototype that is made or created like you want them to be. So again, you don't have to do the 3. Definitely not. This is not the final product. You can just choose one that is more appropriate for you and for the solution at this point. So now we would really like to give you some time, and definitely not enough. It's just a short time for you to be playful and get creative and start, doing something and preparing a prototype. It's only 20 minutes that we have now. It's likely that you'll need to build something physically as well. So we'll ask you to build your prototype or your plan for it. That's also okay. But we really encourage you to do something and try it out, because it's the best way to approach this. So you're building something for your users to react to. So for you to test that assumption that you picked in the previous step. So in our case, with the pill dispenser, we have 3 layers here. We have the caregiver, the actual dispenser, and the patient. Because what we're trying to test is that we can always be accurate, or like my dispenser will always be accurate when providing pills to the user. And that's why we thought, okay, we're gonna have different layers of it. So the caregiver will scan the prescription with an app, and the caregiver will confirm the information entered. The information will be added into a calendar in the pill dispenser. That's on the dispenser layer. The caretaker or the patient will add the pills into the pill boxes, and the pill dispenser will do a calibrating test, including a weight test, and sort out the pills, when to take them, how much to take them, etc. The caretaker will validate this pill dispensing. So there's always a human and the dispenser itself checking on it. The dispenser may play music to notify the patient. The patient will hear their favorite song that says that it's time to take X pill. The dispenser controls the weight at each distribution and informs, sends this data back to the caretaker and the doctor. So this is just the example that we did. It's a works-like sort of prototype, very quick, but it will already help us be able to interview caretakers or elderly people and get some ideas on how this may work. So we're now going to give you some time so you can, again, get playful and try to plan your prototype or build your prototype. There are great tools in Miro that you may already know, and you will find lots of them in the left side of your screen. You can find, obviously, stickies, but also lots of cool templates, emojis as we use them. You can also draw, etc. You can draw videos, images, and all of that. Yeah. So I'll give you 20 minutes. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to write in the chat.
Just making sure that Elena is getting the information from Gregory. So in the chat, there's an answer on the question that you raised earlier.
In fact, Elena, if you can find me on Miro in the top right, in the list of people, and you can just click on me and get me to follow you, that would help, so I can just see where your board is. Oh, Elena, is Elena Salamandik the same as the Elena that's asking questions in the chat? Ah, okay, I'll follow you back. Yeah, so I think if I look at exactly, so I see you just answered me. So it actually seems to me that the better way to prototype this is actually to give a full demonstration of what your solution could be to 10 potential customers. And at the end of that discussion, say to them, if we were able to provide exactly what we just discussed to you, how much would you be willing to pay? Now, people might not just give you a number because sometimes they struggle with that. So you might want to give like sort of thresholds, or you would say, well, would you agree to pay $200 to $500? Would you agree to pay $500 to $1,000? Would you agree to pay $1,000 to $1,500? And so you give them a bit of these brackets that would help narrow how much people would actually be willing to pay. Because they might just answer you, no, we wouldn't be willing to pay anything, or they would answer yes, if this is actually something that would provide value for us, then we would pay. But then understanding exactly how much is why I was saying maybe those brackets could be a good approach. So rather than a checkout, it actually just feels like you need to have a 10-page pitch deck and then go ahead and actually pitch it to a few organizations. Exactly, but I think it's more probable that you'll manage to reach out to a few organizations, even on LinkedIn, and say, hi, we'd really just like to take 30 minutes of your time to show you a solution that we think could be super valuable for you or save you money. I mean, in any case, you need to be clear on what you're offering them. And then if they agree to that, at the end, you would ask them this question. But I think there's a higher chance that that would happen than a chance of them just randomly finding your web page and checking out. I think that's quite unlikely that you would actually get them there. Would it be enough commitments? I think you have to be very careful in your wording when you talk to them and make sure that you're not, that you're like, would you genuinely pay this? And, really be sensitive in listening to them, because they could say, yeah, sure. But that's a very kind of light kind of yes, sure. And I think you should, at the very least, ask 10, if not 25 organizations to give you a bit of a clearer idea. I mean, what you can also do is just say to them, you don't even have to do it, but you could just say to them, would you actually agree to sign a letter of intent saying that if we were to develop this, you would actually pay it and you would actually buy it from us. And if they agree to signing that letter, it remains a letter. It doesn't mean they'll actually buy anything, but at least it's proving that they are willing to sign something saying that they might even buy it. So that, if you had quite a few of those, ideally 25, but I know that's quite a stretch, but that would actually give you clarity on people's will to buy this from you. And Jerry just sent some more about the right pricing. Romana is asking, what is a Maid-Like prototype? And so you might just want to show technically how it's made. So if we take the example that we were giving, which was this pill dispenser, the way it's actually made is that you would have, I think, two major parts of the solution. You would have the software part and the hardware part. And then both of those, you could show how it's made. So the software is probably a stack of different code that you would use to develop it. So you would have code that is linked to the hardware. You would have coding that's related to the actual app that you're creating. You might have a front-end system, which is one, and a back-end system, which is another. So you'd have different layers that you would be using to actually develop the software of your solution. And then in the hardware, you would probably have an injection molded box. You probably have mechanics and mechanisms inside it with springs and release mechanisms and so on. And so you would probably, in the case of a Maid-Like prototype, show actually what are the components and the schematics of how these come together into your solution. Now, if it's not software and it's not hardware, so for example, if you're running workshops like the one we're running today, the Maid-Like might be a Gantt chart. It's like, well, these are the steps that we go through to actually produce a workshop where we can host people and hopefully teach them something valuable. And that might be going from the conceptualization, the communication, the execution, the follow-up, etc. Hope that helps, Romana.
Yes, thank you. But this isn't actually a prototype that works. It's just to find out if we can do it, for example, that way. Or?
Yeah, exactly. I think the first step is just actually you understanding how you would make it. And if you know that already, then you might want to do a step further and actually start making it and seeing if that works together. Like, do these pieces, if it's software, do these pieces actually fit? And can it come together? If it's hardware, you know, can we actually make this in the way that we want? Elena, what if we have a committed lead that wants a solution developed for them? Would that be enough to go ahead and then adapt? So that's a very good question that Elena's asking. So in the cases where you have a lead, so a potential sale that is willing to pay something for you to do, willing to pay for you to develop something. So Elena, I think there is some caution to have in that. It's great if you can develop something tailored to their needs, because then you'll make sure that you can sell it. What you also want to be making sure in parallel is that you keep your eye on the bigger picture. I think, you know, if Miro had only created a whiteboard for our needs, then maybe our needs were very specific around running these types of workshops. But Miro really managed to take a step back and create a tool that could cater to the needs of us, but could cater to the needs of people doing more boardroom style presentations, to people doing personal development journey workshops, to people prototyping things through templates. So it's great if you can have the commitment of someone, of course, but also try and keep that eye on where you really want to go while building what you're doing, so that your solution can actually cater to other clients, and that you end up building a software as a service and you don't end up building a platform only for one customer. I know it's easy to say, less easy to do, but I think it's just a word of caution that it's fantastic, but you should also just be clear on what your big picture is and to ensure that you don't go too quickly into that. Thank you, Ray.
Since the group is significantly smaller than when we started, just take your chances to ask our experts anything you want right now, because they have the possibility to answer them, right?
So I'm thinking that for the sake of time, and since this is the last step where you had an activity to do, we might move on. But the board will still be available for all of you. So you can, as soon as I'm done, go back and continue building, if that works. I just realized we're going over time a little bit. All right, great. So if you slowly come back to me again, follow me in Miro or go back to Zoom and follow my presentation. I'll just stop the clock. So the prototyping step was the last one we had for you today to work on, but there is obviously a next step where you take what you've built and put it in front of the real user or stakeholder. Listen a lot, integrate their feedback into your solution, and start again. So go for the second iteration. In our example of the pill dispenser, this may be interviewing technical experts, caregivers, do research on the accuracy of these types of machines, etc. It's very important that you approach all of your interviews and your testing with respect, responsibility, and honesty. This is something that we love to dig more in depth, but we don't have time now. That will be for the testing phase of it. We also wanted to share some resources with you that you can use to prototype. So these are a bunch of platforms that you can use to prototype digitally, to prototype a hardware, programs, and then just general platforms that may be useful. You may know them, but if not, make sure to come back to this slide and explore them. Then, of course, we have Miro, which we're using today, but I just wanted to say that there are many, many more templates that Miro can offer. There is also Miroverse, which you may know. I'm a big fan of this. This is just where the community drops their own templates. So it keeps getting bigger and there's really cool stuff out there. It's in Miro that you can use to prototype. And I encourage you to explore that as well. Then I just wanted to take a minute, 30 seconds, to reflect on what you've learned today and how you found the session. So instead of us providing you the takeaways, we thought we could all share our own. So if you want, I'll get out of the presentation now, and you can click N in your keyboard and share your takeaway in a sticky. That's a really good one, Tyler. You can do a lot with relatively little resources. A well-structured way of approaching a project, very important. Great. Yeah, that's really true. It's easier to brainstorm with other people. It's very helpful to have insights and ideas from different people. All right, I think these are really cool, really good takeaways. I'll just move on for the sake of time, but feel free to add more. I just want to end by saying that you can join Unleash, that you can, this was a taste of what we do in Unleash, but you can join our programs and learn much more and play with these concepts a bit more. So we welcome youth from 20 to 35 years old around the world who are passionate about creating impact in the world around them. We are as inclusive, or we try to be as inclusive as possible. We cover costs for everyone. And you can follow us on social media to hear about our programs, and you can also sign up in this Google form to receive the news. We do a lot of physical programs, and we also now do a lot of online programs, as you can see on the right. And I think, Jerry, would you want to say something about Miro?
Yes, so first of all, again, thank you very much to our hosts today, Maria and Gregory. Awesome job with such a big group, still making it interactive. Really grateful that you were our second host of the Miro Startup Program. I just wanted to remind you guys that first of all, there's $1,000 in credit for startups that are not older than 2 years and already registered company. I put the link in here, and you could also choose Unleash as your partner. So this will speed up the process. So I put the link again in the chat. And then also I just wanted to share with you guys that at the 3rd of March, we will have the next event, which will be about a minimal viable brand. So with limited resources, creating an awesome brand for your startup. Everybody that was part of this will get an invitation as well. And then I think, again, thank you